Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating the Curve. Now, are you ready to be unsquashed? I have one of my favourite people on today. I have personally had an unsquashing from this lady, the magnificent Trisha Lewis. I can hear applauses in the distance, Trisha, because this woman is magnificent. When I first started my business 3+ years ago, just before I started it, I had some sessions with Trisha because I was feeling incredibly lost, didn't know where I was going, and it was about 4 or 5 sessions, didn't we? And the clarity, the becoming myself, the journey, it was fantastic. So welcome, Trisha, to this platform. So I've sort of pumped you up there now. So, do you want to tell everyone who you are and what you do? Because, I'm setting you up for this magnificence now.
I like the word magnificent. That is good. Yeah, I'll just go with that. Because I'm quite old now, and I feel that I can own words like that, and we'll get to that later because there was a time when I would have gone all kind of coy and modest and about compliments. But I think in old age, a few filters come off, which is quite relaxing. So if I say anything completely balmy during this lovely chat we're going to have, then I will just use old age as an excuse, Anna. I'm basically somebody who went a bit from the arts world into the business world, if you could call it that. But at the age of nearly 60, I'm now 68, just for context. So I suddenly thought, why don't I set up as a communication coach? And technically, I had all the necessary bits in place. I had a portfolio career, I think it's called. I don't know if that term still exists. Does it?
Yeah, I think it does. I heard someone mention it the other day, and I actually thought that's a really nice term for it. I love
It
it.
is. Or some people say non-linear, which is another way of putting it.
Yes.
And it's way more positive than saying a mess of a non-career muddle. I mean, that's silly. It's very interesting. So I had a lot of work in the theatre world. So as an actor, doing professional theatre, and as a speaker, an after dinner speaker, an entertaining speaker. I even did a bit of cabaret at one stage. I worked for quite a long time doing reminiscent pieces that I wrote and put together in care homes, which was fascinating. So I also then developed myself as a funeral celebrant. Fascinating. I still do bits and bobs of this now. The main point was that everything involved. I also did a degree as a mature student when I was in my late 40s, and it was communication. So, all in all, I thought, there you go. You've got all the ingredients to be of help to people who want to learn more about how to communicate, how to either do public speaking or just generally manage rapport building and all those things. And it sort of started from there and actually evolved more into this kind of mindset confidence thing as I think as I evolved and found all these challenges, and as I worked with clients, obviously, and learned more and more. So again, at quite a mature age, a few years later, I actually wrote a book called The Mystery of the Squash Self. Obviously, every author has to have their book on the desk, so I'm just showing that to
Absolutely.
camera.
Do you know what? I've lent mine to my business partner.
Oh,
So it's not on my shelf anymore because I normally flash it up too because it is one of my favourite books.
well, I'm sort of refreshing my using it more now, because it's funny, these things, sometimes you do them and you sort of put them on a shelf somewhere and you think, oh well, I've done that. And the same with my TEDx talk, which I did a similar about a year later, and it was on a similar topic. And that this was basically the coming together of this concept that I'd come up with because I'd been attacked when I set up in business by imposter syndrome.
Mm.
as I think it sort of was. And then I realized, oh my gosh, there's stuff in my life that I'm thinking that was there before, and this and that and the other, and all these bits came flying at me from, and then I sort of began to settle a bit, having done a lot of research into the imposter syndrome stuff, and a, did a lot of talks and a lot of workshops, and I thought, no, there's something else going on, which is when I came up with this sort of almost a cousin to imposter syndrome called self squashing. And at that point, I invented Investigator Lewis. I invented this idea of being a detective almost and putting everything out on the forensics table. And that is quite good, I think, for this podcast, because we'll get into that. But in a way, this whole detective forensics
Mm.
approach to what the heck is going on in your head is might be useful for your listeners.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, even, I'm the same as you. I've been in business about 3 years now, and I've had my own squashing, but this sort of imposter syndrome always does start sneaking back in sometimes, particularly when you're feeling whether you're doing something new. So this is a new podcast that I'm launching, and we're doing this conversation before I've actually launched. I'm going, what if no one listens to it? What happens? Oh, good, it's going to be awful. And I start, these things start popping into my head. It's really strange. And I read something the other day, and it was by a journalist. I think he was a BBC journalist, but he's an award-winning, really big journalist, has done some huge pieces, very well known. And he said, every time I go and interview someone or I go on an assignment, he said, I think this one's going to be a flop. I'm not going to do it. And it just shows us that even, however accomplished you become, they sort of do stay there with you. What if someone doesn't know what it feels like to feeling squashed? Like, what might they be feeling? For me, it's doubt and things like that. What sort of feelings, and how would they feel?
The what you just said is perfect. I mean, yes, you hear about people like,
Mm.
I don't know, Maya Angelou and Hugh Grant and all
Mm.
sorts of people talking about imposter syndrome. So I think really, in a way, calling it a syndrome's not that helpful. It's a
Mm.
feeling. It's a feeling. We are humans. We feel. Okay, that's, and also we tend to go straight to negative because that's a survival instinct bit of wiring. I think that's really one of the most useful things that I got my head around, quite literally, is the way our brains work. And I think partly when I did this work with people with dementia, I did a lot of geeky research on brains,
Mm.
and then I've done it more to do with all this doubt stuff, because it brings it much more into a sort of real, manageable thing to understand. Oh yeah, look, this is what brains do. We go to negative thinking, we tend to believe our feelings, whereas actually our brain is just picking up gut reactions and things that are going on in our
Mm.
body. So if we're tired, if we've had a bad night's sleep, if we're a little bit
Mm.
stressed out about something, we're going to get more of this onslaught of I'm useless, everything's gone wrong, because that's just our brain trying to protect us in a way, because it thinks,
Mm.
oh, we're in an emergency situation. So my definition of self squashing, which places it slightly different, and I think in a more joyful place than imposter syndrome, is this: suppressing your true self due to a fear that revealing and owning your full passion, personality, and power will have you judged as an unlikable show off.
Mm.
So it sort of, in a way, it's more positive, because it's saying you are fabulous. You are full of all
Mm.
this wonder, but you're pulling back on it because you don't want to be judged as, no, it's not so much I'm not able to do this thing, I'm going to be found out as a fraud. It's more, I've got everything going to be able to do this thing. Even if it's me as a new person in this thing, I've still got what I need at this stage I'm not an imposter, but I'm somehow worried that if I don't know, if I start saying too much, if I start giving out some original ideas and opinions, or being my quirky individual personality, whether that be a very quiet, geeky type of, I'm using that word, it's probably a bit rude to say geeky, but I think we all know what I mean. And I mean it actually with a lot of affection, because I can be very geeky, believe it or not, but
I'm
also,
a geek.
yeah.
I'm a geek, and I love it. I love being a geek.
Yay, good. No, no need to apologize for using that word. So, it can be a quiet, more that sort of, reflective thinker type that people don't quite understand. And you've got a certain style of communicating. It can be a very extroverty, enthusiastic type who uses their hands a lot, like this guest that you've got on. It can be whatever. There's no, I'm not saying that you're a very extrovert person and you're pulling yourself back. I'm just saying that you are who you are, and the bits of you that you feel most aligned with, you're squashing, because you somehow think, no, I can't have that out there somehow. I need to be more normal. I need to be
Yeah.
more fitting in somehow. And the minute you do that, the feeling, talking about feelings, because that's what this is it's horrible, actually, because um it's it's like you're betraying yourself, and you're doing it, and you go on to a sort of attack mode in your head, attacking yourself, because you're sort of angry that you're not being yourself,
Yeah.
and angry with you, and then you almost get angry with other people in a strange sort of way as well. It's just a general fighty feeling that is very unrelaxing. And I think for me, it first came up with the good old business networking, Anna.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. I was thinking about, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about a lot of people who complain about LinkedIn, and that network is where they're saying that people are always sort of speaking quite negatively. Oh, the show offs on LinkedIn, that, and people put posts apologizing. Oh, I don't want to brag, but I did win an award, and I'm like, no, that's a good thing. Don't apologize about it, or I don't want to seem show offy. But I won an award. I want to tell everyone about it. I know this is a lovely thing, share it. But people are so worried about sharing good news, like you said, because you think you're going to be a show off. And I completely understand, because I'm terrible at it. And I remember when I got on the list for the 100 entrepreneurs to watch from Telegraph and NatWest, and I did a couple of posts about it because my business partner really pushed me to, but it felt so uncomfortable. I felt like I shouldn't be on the list, that people were going to judge me for being on this list. And actually, it didn't help that there was a few negative posts beforehand about people going, oh, it's this list is coming out, and what if we don't? But they were being really, really funny about it. And actually, I got January last year, I got LinkedIn Top Voice, like the blue badge. No idea how I got it, but I got it, and it was lovely. I'm not the biggest the biggest person on there, but it was really nice. But the vitriol and negative posts about the blue badge, and people getting these, they give them to anyone these days, and it was horrific. And I'm like, but it's lovely. I loved seeing other people get these blue badges, and there were people that I knew did really good posts and got, I was like, I'm really glad they got recognized. And it was nice to see people, not just big creators, getting it, because the year before last, I don't know about this year, but year before last, there were some smaller creators and smaller business people getting it. I know 2 or 3 from John Asperian's group got it. A few other female creators. And I was like, this is wonderful. But the hate for these people getting a tiny little blue badge, because it's really funny, isn't it? It's and that doesn't help with how you're feeling inside, I think.
No, absolutely not. I mean, obviously, I grew up in an era where the phrase "oh, nobody likes a show off" was actually
Yeah.
commonplace. So, I mean, that was just like, no, pipe down. Nobody likes a show off. And I think there's still this thing: if you put your hand up in class, I mean, I obviously it's decades since I've been anywhere near school, but there's always that sort of, oh, clever clogs, sort of
Yeah.
thing, just because you want to answer a question. But I think the thing I would say, and this is so ridiculously simple, and yet I think quite it's quite powerful in its simplicity. You're not being a show off unless you're showing off.
Mm.
That is a direct quote from my TEDx, actually. And it seemed to hit home quite well. You're not being a show off unless you're showing off. So we all know show offs, that would rightly be labeled as such. The sort of, I mean, we've seen politicians or celebs or whatever, the ones that we don't warm to that much. They are sort of slightly unaware of their environment, a bit possibly up the what's called Dunning-Kruger, which is the sort of, if you like, the opposite to imposter syndrome. It's named after the researchers, but it's basically deluded, and thinking that you're brilliant when you're
Yeah.
not. I mean, that must be a lovely world to live in, but it's not. Most of us don't live in that world. We live in the other world. But it's so true that we tend to see people that are showing off in
Mm.
a cloth-eared way, just not reading the room, and on broadcast mode, and not making anything relevant to anybody else, and all the rest of it. Me stuff. I mean, you see it I don't know, have you ever been to a wedding where somebody's done a speech and you just think, oh, for goodness sakes,
Yeah.
you're not talking about the bride or the groom. You see, you're putting all these brilliant jokes because you're so funny. And there's nothing wrong with using humor, but you know what I mean? It's like they've
Yeah.
just got it turned up with them on broadcast. So we've seen these people, we don't like them, and in our heads we're thinking, I have to do anything in my power to avoid being one of these people, because otherwise people will react like I'm reacting now. They'll react to me. But
Yeah.
actually, we're not that person. We're not doing it. All we're doing is sharing. We're just sharing. And it's funny because I think everybody has their sort of, um, the way they may be. If they do go out there with something, they sort of wrap it in whatever their thing is. I mean, for me, it's humor. So
Mm.
I overwrap with. I mean, I like humor, and I mean, I like laughing and being a bit daft. But certainly in the earlier days of growing my coaching business, I overwrapped with humor,
Mm.
if that makes any sense. So it's just something, whatever your thing is, whether it's having a lot of academic knowledge or whatever, you you might overwrap with that because you're so sort of not relaxed about just
Mm.
saying something, sharing something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, for me, it's probably I overwrap with sort of sometimes like maybe too nice as people pleasing, sort of that sort of areas. Yeah, I think people pleasing comes a lot along with this. It's unsquashing quite regularly. Get people that do both. So I tend to be like the bubbly, light-hearted. Oh, everything's lovely all the time because I that's my compensation. Because I think if I'm any other emotion that people might see me as stuck up or something else, and yeah, it's really hard. And I think also because I in the least recent years I found out that I was neurodivergent, and I'm not very good at reading people very well, so I think that's played along with it as well. I'm on the pathway for diagnosis for ADHD at the moment. Actually, interestingly, on that, what you were saying about from childhood and things like that, I think that part of mine comes back from that as well, because having ADHD and marching to the beat of my own drum a little bit, that's what everyone said, because I didn't really know, when I was younger, what ADHD was. Oh, she's a bit different, marches to the beat of her own drum, that sort of thing. And that makes you want to squash yourself as well, because like exactly back to what you were saying, I want to be normal like everyone else, and I wasn't like the same as everyone else. I was different. And so, because I've sort of, I don't think when we had mind squashing that I knew that I had ADHD. So now I think I need to go some more unsquashing to unpack that as well. So I should be back for some more sessions. But it's really
I
interesting.
Yeah, and it helped me a lot actually to the fact that I've ended up married to a really lovely guy who is sort of a little bit, a little. I don't. I hate. Oh God. If I say on the autism spectrum, there might be people coming back and saying, "Oh, everybody's got autism." Everybody, I don't, but he is, and
Yeah.
like me in our day, these things were never talked about, never diagnosed,
Mm,
etc. But his son is diagnosed autistic, and I mean, how it shows up is quite interesting because it's made it. I've had to work harder at understanding his way of communicating.
mm,
He's had to work harder at understanding my way of communicating, which is can be, yeah, I think a really good if you're with someone supportive, then that makes it a very good
mm.
learning curve. Obviously, if you're not, then you just have arguments all the time, and that's not ideal.
Yeah.
Things like, for instance, you talked about not picking up how people are feeling or facial
Mm,
expressions. I mean, um, Steve has talked about this openly. He just doesn't quite get. I'm incredibly expressive, and he's had to really work out, almost make a logbook of what my various expressions mean because they are quite confusing. But likewise, I have in the past, so it's fine now, but I have, sort of said, well, I don't know what you're feeling. I don't understand. You've not
mm,
reacted. I've just said all this stuff, and it's as if you haven't been listening. And interestingly, that was one of the things that I was going to mention because when people are communicating, worried about being on video, etc.,
mm,
all of these things are a part of their package of what I call the fibs that hold us back, fears, illusions, and baggage. And
mm.
that would be definitely in there because they might have had responses maybe from somebody, maybe they have done some little thing on camera and somebody said, well, you don't come across very warm, or,
Yeah.
a bit slow,
Yeah.
or it's a bit dull, or it's a bit monotone, or whatever. And
Mm,
they'll be running back to their little cave thinking I'm never going to do that again, whereas
mm.
actually there are ways around this.
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously this podcast is for STEM founders, and I think there's a couple of areas that I'm an ex-programmer. I've worked in programming for a while. I went to a good degree in computing, and I think that I know that one thing, you go back to that word geeky or nerdy, when you're younger, like being yourself, if you aren't the norm, if you're not the cool kid, I was always like top of the class, swotty, you got all of it, didn't you? You got all of this language, and you start squashing yourself because, particularly in STEM, you tend to, you get a lot of very clever people. And for some reason, children and people don't like clever people, or they're jealous of them or something. So, in the STEM industry, I'm finding it quite prevalent, this sort of, oh, I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to, I don't want to share my vast knowledge because I might be seen as oversharing and too clever and looking down on them, which is, it's a real shame, isn't it?
It is a real shame, that whole kind of coming across as arrogant is the other one,
Mm,
isn't it? And I can get, you've probably had one passing comment even from years ago. This is what I mean by baggage, that it sticks with you because,
mm,
well, it just does. But I think I've got a bit of an idea about this showing up to share a thing
mm,
when all of these fears are besieging you. And I just want to put this right. Here's one of my favorite words is curiosity. There's nothing
mm,
that unusual about it. A lot of people will say it's a great thing. But I kind of go one step further and talk about detective mindset. And I think I'm a bit of a frustrated detective, but I'm not sure there are any jobs going for 68-year-old women with no actual experience in the force. But no, I think it is a good way, a non-mysterious way of approaching things. And what it really means is that whatever situation, whether it's networking, doing videos, having conversations, doing posts, whatever, put your detective mindset on. And that means that you are fundamentally asking questions. Now, and I know you're asking questions and you're finding connections, basically, and you're
Mm.
looking for clues and all the rest of it. So instead of being perhaps in a situation where you think, oh, I'm just going to say some stuff, some interesting stuff. Okay, here, this, that, and the other. This is interesting, blah, blah, blah. It's more like you've got to approach it with as if you're asking a question. So if you were at a networking thing, those awful moments around the breakfast table where you each get 2 minutes, I hope they don't happen so much these days. But I went to a few of those, and you have your prepared little pitch that you might have been up half the night worrying about because it sounded too much. It sounded like you were showing off. It sounded like you weren't interesting enough, whatever it is, and you've got to fit it all into 2 minutes. Ugh. And so you get to this moment and you deliver your pitch and you think, well, that was useless. You go away and you berate yourself and you think, well, nobody's going
Mm.
to remember me. I probably made a fool of myself, and it just sounded pathetic, or it sounded arrogant, or it sounded like I was showing off, or it sounded whatever. But actually, I tried this out at a couple, and I think it really surprised people. I just listened to other people's pitches, if you like, and I thought to myself, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have the brain that is able to do this very well. I just thought, oh, that connects with that, and that person's connected with this person's, and I've got a connection that links with what they've just said. And so I almost went off script, and I just started by saying, it's interesting that you said about XYZ, because actually also that linked with what you said about XYZ. And it occurred to me that it's very similar in the work that I do, XYZ. And I don't know what you think, but I've always wondered if blah, blah, blah. And that was way more effective than just sitting there,
Mm.
just chanting some horrible thing that you got off ChatGPT. And I'm just thinking, well, there was nobody knows what my personality is. Nobody really knows what I've
Mm.
done because it was so boring, and they've gone on to the next one and I've forgotten. And that's quite depressing. So it really, it sort of shakes things up a bit because people don't expect it. But it also just
Mm.
makes for a much more normal conversation.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it? And I think that is the thing. It's this, like, you hear this word authenticity quite a lot, because these forced things that aren't aren't authentic. And I know for me, I've been trying to work out what is authentic to me, because sometimes when you're squashed, you've almost lost your own voice, haven't you? And it's incredibly difficult, because I think I've rewritten. So as well as launching the podcast, I'm fully launching my Creative Curve community and business straight after the podcast launches. And I have rewritten my site and my pages probably about 30 times. And someone said to me, they don't sound like you. And I'm like, but what do I sound like? I don't know what my personality is. I've kind of lost who's me.
Mm.
It probably is there somewhere, whether I'm too scared to admit what my personality is, or I just can't identify. I know John Asperian always says you can't see the label from inside the jar. But it's really interesting, because when I'm doing these pictures, because someone said I did do one of those where you had to introduce yourself, and they said, like, what do you do? And my answer was, who knows? Because that literally was how I was feeling at the time. I don't know what I do. I don't know how, like, I kind of do, but not really. I can't articulate it right now, because in my head, I don't really know. And I feel like sometimes, and I do find this a lot in STEM, actually, because it's quite technical things that people are trying to get over. What do I do? What who do I serve? You know, and maybe that is that barrier as well. You've squashed yourself so much you don't know.
I think that's absolutely valid. So, so obviously, I say things like, and actually, that was probably way more memorable than any other pitch that they heard. And it gave people an opportunity to ask questions. And actually, that's why I think it makes sense. You say, well, you know, I suppose I could give you the official definition of what I do, but it's a bit dull, isn't it? And actually, does it really make much sense? So ask me some questions. I basically work in the area of whatever. And do you, for
Mm,
instance, if I used this word da 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 da, would that mean something to you? Or is it one of those words that's a bit sort of, whatever the word is, curse of knowledge stuff. So open it up. And the other way to do that, I mean, obviously, this AI is going to be a problem. I have
mm,
used it on many occasions and thought, oh, I can go with, that it's like a sort of kid in a sweet shop thing. You suddenly
mm,
think, yes, oh, that's brilliant. They've done that brilliantly. I mean, I've put long, long prompts in, can you write me a bio based on this? I put these so it's not like I'm just sort of being lazy, but your immediate reaction is, oh, yes, that's really good. But then when you look at it, I advise anybody to then go away and look at it again and again and think, hang on a minute, but like you
mm,
said, but I don't actually speak like that, or it sounds a bit
mm,
cheesy, or um, that's a word I've never used in my life before, etc. So the other way, so it could be useful for getting maybe some little ideas that you've not seen. I have used Google LM Notebook and listened to the pretend podcast that you can get. It's all free.
yeah,
So I've uploaded my website or my something about my book or whatever, an art, and it's just brilliant. And I've thought, oh my gosh, who is this Trisha Lewis? She's fascinating because it just, and in a way, maybe using that almost as a bolstering up of remembering that actually your stuff is good. You have got useful information.
mm,
You are an interesting person. I think that's quite a nice little game you can play, as long as you don't just get sunk in it again, because then you are, as you say, you're forgetting that you are the person that should be instigating all of this. So
yeah,
I just maybe advise walking around with your voice note thing on your phone, because everybody's got
mm,
one of those. And yeah, but if you just talk normally into this thing,
mm,
just rabbit on in the way you talk, you say, what do I do? What do I do?
yeah,
Do this. Do a bit of that, and then maybe bung it into one of these free Descript or something. Get a free transcript so you can sort of read it back and find, highlight the things. That was when I said that. That's a good phrase, and
yeah.
yeah, because we do all have our little. I mean, one of the coaching things that I have found the most useful to people is what I call the say it loud out loud session, because I literally do a pretend podcast thing, and it means that people are relaxed and they start.
Mm,
Because I'm a good podcast host and I get them relaxed, and therefore they just start talking like they would normally talk, and they realize that they're coming out with these really interesting phrases, ways of expressing something, almost frameworks for things, and all sorts of things that they hadn't really realized that they'd got in them. And then obviously it's recorded, so they can now actually remember it and see it, and because that's thinking
yeah.
like that is the way that we get. Yeah, I think I've blabbered on way too much now,
Oh
but
no, definitely. It's really interesting. Do you know, it's funny because when people ask me about using ChatGPT, because I teach a few people how to use it, one of the big things I say to people is very much like that. I say, get on a Teams call with one of your colleagues, pick a subject and talk about it for half an hour, 40 minutes, a bit like we're doing on podcasts. I said, you don't have to put the video live, but what you can do is you can transcribe it, and then you can pop it into ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, pick me like, we've been talking about X, Y, and Z. This is our audience. Here's my transcript. pick 3 topics out of this that might make a blog post and tell me what they are. And it will come up with 3 ideas for blog posts for you, and then that kind of gives you some direction and some insight. I mean, you can get it to write or draft. I would say draft blog posts, because I never say get it to do your final version. Get it to draft an idea, and some social posts. Get it to draft some social post ideas, but then go in and add yourself to them. But it's kind of taking everything that you've got and all your brains and helping you communicate it through different formats, which you can then, I think sometimes people just need a starting point, something to start with. Not everyone is good at sitting down and writing a blog or sitting down writing a post. They need just a little spark or something to get going. So they might have these blog titles and a couple, like some bullet points from ChatGPT, and go, oh right, yeah, okay, I can write a blog from that. But it's all come from their brain because they've just talked with their colleague. It's really natural, exactly what you said. And it's shorter as well, because you can talk for half an hour and then you've got it all out your system.
Absolutely. That is definitely the way to do it. Or, as you say, just have a conversation on Zoom, and I love that. And it's in the conversations that the gems come up, not when you sit down. It's a bit difficult. You sit down with or either a type thingy or a piece of paper and a pen. You're immediately in a slightly different space. You need that kind of flow to talk absolute rubbish as well, so that because even in the rubbish there's quite often some nice little bits of treasure to be picked out. But I just think that also that sense of not worrying too much about something being right or wrong, which I think maybe for listeners, that is a big deal, quite worried. I mean, again, I've got used to being with somebody who's quite a literal thinker. And anybody who knows me will think that must be torture for him, Trisha, because I do tend to go a little bit off tangent and come up with made up words and all sorts of stuff. But it's a thing that could put a block in you if you weren't careful, and it could almost come across. Certainly if you were in conversation with people you don't know, that's where you possibly are in danger of coming across as, I don't know, arrogant or a bit standoffish or a bit cold, whereas all you're actually doing is going through a process inside your head, one that I don't tend to go through because I just tend to have words come out my mouth. But I know what it's like from Steve, that moment of silence where nothing's happening, where you're basically just thinking, that doesn't make sense. Did she mean this? Did they mean that? Or what? And you're trying to find the right words. And in that moment, with no facial expression, and the person doesn't know you, and we all make these really, really quick judgments about people because that's just part of our primitive wiring. We had to in order to survive. Are they friend? Are they enemy? So we can't really help that. So what you've got to do is think, what is this thing I do? Oh yeah, I tend to do that a lot. Right. Do I need to maybe even get that out? Actually say it. How about saying it? Like I've said to you just now, I've said lots of things. I use my hands a lot. I blabber on a lot. I go off on tangents. I've said it, rather than worrying that it's happening and people will think I'm weird. So say it. Just say, by the way, we don't know each other. I need to warn you that there are moments where I go quiet. Please don't think it's because I'm not listening or that I'm not about to respond. I just have this really slow way of processing some things, and I need to, I just have to reflect on stuff before it comes out my mouth. And they would say, oh no, that's really interesting. I know what you mean. And all of a sudden you're into a really good, much more relaxed place. If you, it's the same, microphone. It's the same thing as the squashing in a way. If you're trying to suppress your natural self, then people make odd judgments about you. They see something is a bit not right, and then they think, oh, I don't really trust this person, or there's something a bit off about this person, or I'm not going to get on with this person. And that's not fair on you because you're none of those. You're not worthy of any of those judgments. So get it out there. Just actually reveal. Because the wonderful thing is, you've then opened it up for everybody else in a lovely, generous way to say, oh, I'm really glad you said that. I have that problem too when I'm meeting new people, blah, blah,
Mm.
blah, blah, blah. Da, da, da.
Yeah. It feels lovely, and it feels like you've made a connection then, doesn't it? It's really nice. I do the same. Like, I've been really honest with people about having ADHD now that I sort of know. It's interesting because there's a couple of times in my life at work I've been told that I talk too much. It's weird though, because when I talk too much, I do it in bursts. So I can be quiet for hours, and then I will come and blah 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 blah, to get it out, because I get quite overwhelmed. So I can't do it continuously. But it's really interesting because people have mentioned I talk too much, and it tends to be just because I'm in meetings and you're expected to talk. So I'm doing what I think is expected of me. And with ADHD, you then tend to overdo it slightly. Not to the extreme. I know that from an ADHD perspective, that I know people struggle with this a lot more than me. But I don't remember any of the good things anyone said about me. I just remember twice that people said that I talked a little bit too much, and it lives with you. And then you I'm now, even now, in meetings, and I think, no, maybe I won't say anything, or maybe I won't talk because people have mentioned these things, and it is really hard because. But when I started to mention to people that I've got ADHD, people are like, oh, actually, funny that you say that. And again, they said, oh, I wonder if that's why we got attracted to each other, because I'm wondering if I have it. And then suddenly I'm talking to someone and they're like, oh, do you do this too? Do you do that too? And they're probably the only other person in that room that is similar to me, but actually we've now connected, and we both thought we were a bit weird and awkward, but actually no, we both have a similar condition that makes us maybe act differently to some of the other people in the room, but somehow we've found our kin in the room, and it's been magical. And
It's
then suddenly we've both gone, ah.
That's the feeling. That's the feeling when you.
Yeah.
So basically, I used to be. I mean, I'm really reluctant to say that I think I probably have an element of this going on, because since I've thought about it and keep hearing about it, a lot of my past makes huge amount of sense. So, but I equally don't want to feel like I'm getting onto some bandwagon. So that's me, that's me being all fluffy because I don't want people to judge me as, oh, she's saying she's got ADHD, everybody's got it. But you and I get on well. So yeah. But anyway, the thing for me was, because I've done a lot of acting, and I can be really, I'm an introvert, extrovert, or whatever. I'm an ambivert. So, I mean, I can spend hours not talking to anybody and I get exhausted if I've done. We had a flat meeting the other night because we're in a shared freehold flat. There are 5 flats, and we have to have these little meetings sometimes. And we were hosting it in our flat, and both Steve and I were absolutely exhausted after an hour of lovely people. Nothing wrong with the lovely, lovely, lovely. But it was just, you'd think, oh, Trisha's an extrovert, this, that, and the other. She's an actor, this, that, and the other. You don't, nobody is that simple to understand. So for me, people used to say things like, and like you say, you hang on to something that you react to thinking it's negative. So people used to say, crazy, for instance, would be a word, yeah, oh, Trisha, she's crazy. And before I went on my own unsquashing journey, which has only been in the last decade, if that, let's just say the last 4 years, really, when I've started to get it together. I took that completely as a negative. And so inside, I would like shrink. I think, oh God, they think I'm crazy. Oh, I'm obviously over the top. I'm obviously saying really weird things. And I would only see it as a negative until I think I actually put it out there. I think I talked to Steve about it, in fact. He said, Trisha, it's a compliment. They love your quirkiness and your slight, whatever it is, that it's a compliment. I'm going to take you by the shoulder and shake this into you. And I eventually got there with it. And therefore, was more relaxed about coming out, doing crazy things like dressing up as Investigator Lewis, on LinkedIn, and doing nutty things because I'm an actor. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't I? I mean, whatever you are, why do you have to hide that away in a box somewhere? So yeah, I think we have to do what I call put our fears through the rationality filter. This is part of
Mm,
the exercises that I do in the book, and it's like we're full of fears. We're just a mess of fears because survival, brains, all the rest of it. So take that fear, whatever it is that you're thinking, and then just say, but hang on a minute. Let's just really put this out on the forensics table. I'm going to get this filter, and it's called the rationality filter, and I'm going to put things in the top, these fears, these illusions, this baggage,
mm,
and they're going to come out in much more manageable little chunks here. And then I'm going to look at them and think, oh no, it's not that, it's this, and that makes complete sense, really. And I'm completely taking this the wrong way, and I'm only looking at it from a negative, and whatever it is, it's an easy little exercise to do. And it's really cognitive thingy, isn't it? It's like
mm.
reframes, just stop, press pause, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think the thing that I've been sort of learning over the last couple of years or so is that you can't please everyone. No, so for example, the people that thought that I talked too much, they were possibly very quiet people or didn't like talking too much. Maybe I would find they talk too little. Maybe it's just different personalities, that people like different things. And actually, this is what I like about authenticity, because if I was talking to someone, I think it was yesterday, and we were talking about CVs, and he was showing me his CV, and it was very black and white, it was very plain. And he says, "Oh, I don't think it reflects me very well, and because I'm quite imaginative and that." And he said, "This just looks a bit boring." And my CV has like rainbow colours at the top, and I've got my own logo, and everything's got like coloured boxes. I mean, it's not over the top, but it's me. And we were discussing the fact that if I'd have sent the CV like him, I feel like people, like his one, that people would have got a real shock when they met me, because I like to manage expectations, and if you don't like my bright CV, you're not going to like me. It's that sort of being your authentic, because you can't please everyone, you can't like everyone, and everyone won't like you, will they? But yeah, somehow we try to make everyone like us.
It's the final chapter in my book is on people pleasing, because it is
Mm,
totally wrapped around all of this. And yeah, it you said at the beginning, it's not like it's a thing that you sort overnight and that's it, done. I
mm,
mean, but the way I describe it is I just get better at recognizing when I'm doing these things. So instead of it was actually Steve who said this. What a hero my husband is. Imagine a spiral, and I'm calling it the self-doubt spiral. So imagine somebody said something, you've taken it a certain way, or you've done something, and you're now beating yourself up, basically, and you've gone
mm,
from a little bit of beating up to now, I am utterly useless. The world is useless. Everything is useless. I don't even know why I'm doing this. And you're right down the bottom of the spiral. And you could stay there for hours, days, even weeks. Whereas having done the work and constantly doing that work, Steve said this. He said, what you do now, Trisha, is that you grab onto the edge and don't let yourself fall down. You actually pull yourself back up. Now, I'd just like to say, Anna, I did a movement then which reminded me of climbing. And before we're probably going to wrap up in a minute, and I just want to mention that at the age of 60, I think I was 65, a couple of years ago. Yeah, I took up climbing. And this is just my way of saying, don't stick with labels that you've got for yourself
mm,
or that people have stuck on you, because actually I was the non-sporty girl at school. I never did any kind of sport as I was growing up. I liked a bit of dancing. And I just went for it because Steve has been climbing all his life, and I was there at the climbing wall learning how to do the bit where you hold on to the rope for your climber, because I thought that would be useful because I can help him. He can go more often. And I thought, "Oh, shall I just try going up on a rope?" And I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm a scaredy cat. I'm afraid of all sorts of things.
Mm.
And there I was. And that was 2 years ago. I'm now doing things that I would never have dreamt possible on the wall. And it has been part of my unsquashing, because when you, I don't know, when you find your sort of flow activities that make you just sort of feel like there's a bit of challenge, but it's achievable and you're having fun and whatever it is, and also know that you've just bashed a stereotype of yourself on the head,
Mm.
that is the most brilliant feeling. So here I am at 68 saying, please just keep evolving. And I'm not saying you've got to go, climbing Mount Everest, but just taking little tiny steps into discomfort zones, even if they're not the ones you want to be in. Just take a few steps. You can always come back out, and so that applies to being on video or doing content. Just give it a go in whatever way you feel could work. And going back to that video thing, I think possibly walking around, chatting into your thing might be one way of doing it, and then maybe editing it down, or having a conversation with somebody so that you're both having a chat rather than it being a sense that it's just you. Because for me, it's not a problem, because probably because of all the years of acting and all the rest of it, but that sense that you've got no feedback coming from an audience when you're talking to a camera is
Mm.
really, really scary for people, and it just freaks
Yeah.
them out. And so if you maybe just put a tripod up at a little distance and had you and somebody chatting in a chair, that might be, it wouldn't feel like you were just talking to camera. That could be an experiment, but they're all experiments. They're all experiments.
Yeah. As is exactly why I have, like, I don't do a podcast on my own and lives on my own, because most of the time, or if I do, it's just very short, like 10 minutes, because I'm much more comfortable in this discussion format if I do stuff that I record on my own. I think I might have told you previously about when I tried to do my website, a video for my homepage, my website. I got to 137 takes, and then I gave up because it was all ums and ahs. It didn't feel natural to me. Yet something like this, I can chat away till, for hours. It's so different. And I would say that, like, for people, talk to someone, if you're not good at talking on your own, because either a colleague or someone who has a similar business to you, or a friend, or someone that knows what you can talk about. So it just makes it easier. I do recommend following Trisha on her social media as well, because not only do you get useful tips and advice, but you get the most laugh out loud videos that you've ever seen, that are brilliant, full of personality. This is what I love. It's really interesting that your natural personality stands out, and that's what I like. And I feel like your videos are very Trisha, with the Detective Lewis. I was saying to Trisha before we started this podcast, there was one where she was talking about wrinkles, and she was just putting her face up to camera, looking and moving her face around about all the wrinkles. It just feels it's so you. It was brilliant, and I absolutely loved it. And I think it's really interesting, because I had a guy that we were doing a marketing course the other day. I was doing a marketing course, and he came in and he did 2 videos. The first one he just did in his car, off the cuff, and he started off the cuff. He just started talking about silliness, and he just started talking about his silliness. He had this personality; it was brilliant. And then he went into a meeting room and did another one, which was about business, and his personality just switched from being really natural, really chatty, to sort of talking much longer, sort of rambling a little bit. His sort of entire glow went, and he just sort of, just started on this spiel that I feel like he remembered and tried to do it. And it was like 2 different people. So it's really easy to switch out of that sort of natural mode.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah. That's and when the point is get good at recognizing that you're doing it, because
Yeah.
if you do it for too long, too much, it's exhausting, and it's a bit depressing, actually. I used to come away from
Mm,
networking things feeling I couldn't quite understand why I felt so down. Um,
yeah.
because basically I am, I've got the performer in me. I mean, it shouldn't have been that was a problem being, but then I realized, no, it's because you haven't really been you. You've sort of
Mm,
been this odd blend of sort of worrying about, oh no, I'm too much. Oh no, I'm not enough. Oh no, I'm too. Blah, blah, blah. You've tried to fit in, from wearing the clothes. Oh, I'm wearing the power suit. I remember one, and there's a chapter in my book. I mean, these cases that are uncovered by the investigator, there are 8 small business owners, and they all sort of go with their various challenges. But what they are, most of them quite from personal experience. One of them is about wearing a dress to a networking event and feeling like a man in drag, which is basically how I feel when I put a dress on. Lovely. If you're into dresses and that's your thing,
yeah.
you feel great in dresses, wear the dresses. But don't wear whatever it may be, a suit, a dress, or whatever, or I need to do some kind of branding thing in my what. Some people just do that because that's natural to them, and
Mm,
that's fabulous. But if you catch yourself doing something because you think you should, well, that's the kind of, you know, the trap
yeah.
that, and you'll do it. We all do it, but just get better at spotting it and think, "Ooh, why
Yeah.
did I do that? Ooh, I don't need to do that, do I? Yes, go right."
I love that. I love that, and that's a great point to finish on. It's when we had my own squashing, we found out most of my life I'd done the shoulds rather than the wants, and you end up not being your authentic self. And so, if people want to follow you, if they want to get in touch with you, book you for an unsquashing, what are the best ways for them to get in contact with you?
I have a website and it's very simple. It's my name, although it's spelled Trisha, not the how it should be spelled. I don't know why I did that ages ago. It's really silly, really. But anyway, trishalewis.com. Even the Lewis isn't my proper name, but that would be a whole nother hour to describe my personal life. So yeah, trishalewis.com has all the links to all my social media, the book, the TEDx, the unsquashing resources, some nice little quizzes, the original imposter syndrome quiz. There's a link to that and all that stuff. And also obviously these power hours that I do. And I am very keen on people getting to know my YouTube channel because I well, anyone who's ever started a YouTube channel will know getting the algorithm to love
Mm,
you is a battle. So, yeah, if people are genuinely wanting more of this kind of stuff, it's nice if you do it just because you're being friendly, but I really want you to do it because you want to see the podcast Self Belief Unsquashed and the video. So, Self Belief Unsquashed in Google would probably have you come up with most of my stuff, which is the advantage of having a little catchphrase.
And what I'll do as well is I'll pop them in the show notes as well. So if people pop in there, they can click on them. So multiple ways to access Trisha Lewis. Love it. Thank you so much, Trisha, for coming on. I shall be booking my next unsquashing session soon. And thank you so much for your time. This has been absolutely brilliant. And I hope people feel a bit more like they can start being their authentic selves after this episode.
Yes, you're not alone, basically, is the general feeling, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for coming on the show, and thank you to our audience, and I shall see you next episode. Bye.